Eagle Rare or Wild Turkey 101, two of the biggest bargains in the game, but which one should you actually buy? Hello and welcome back to the channel, and yes, that's right, if you've seen any of my recent whiskey content, or indeed any whiskey content on YouTube whatsoever in the last year or so, you'll probably know that when it comes to relatively affordable American whiskey, in the UK at least, and I'm pretty sure this kind of sentiment goes out across the world in general, these two are basically often thrown out as just, well, one of the best, or the best, the collective best budget-friendly purchases out there. Now, they aren't proper budget bargain basement offerings. They're kind of, I'd say, one step up if we consider the regular kind of benchmark to be that kind of, you know, everyday 40 to 45% stuff that kind of sits around 25 to 30 pounds a bottle. Well, these are kind of a level up, but only just. Just before we break into these though and start comparing them, a little bit of info on each one. The Wild Turkey 101 comes in the UK right now at the kind of 25 to 30 pound mark. So as I say, price wise, it's not really a lot more than what we'd already consider kind of, you know, entry level decent stuff. Wild Turkey 101 is of course made by the Wild Turkey Distilling Company. They are based in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky in the US, and they were established in 1940. The 101 does have a good heritage though, being released only 2 years later in 1947, and the mash bill is 75% corn, 13% rye, and what's the remainder? 12% barley. So pretty average in terms of bourbon construction, but worth noting for a little bit later. And of course, as the name suggests, it sits at 101 proof or 50.5% ABV. Moving on to the Eagle Rare, this is a little bit more pricey, generally sits around the 30 to 40 pound region depending on where you buy in the UK right now. Eagle Rare is produced by the Buffalo Trace Distillery. They are also from Kentucky, but this time it's Frankfort, which sounds an awful lot like a German town, but it is in Kentucky. The Buffalo Trace Distillery, from which this comes, was founded all the way back in 1805, but has had several name changes since. Eagle Rare though was first released back in 1975, and like the Wild Turkey also has a 75% corn mash bill, followed up with 10% rye and 15% barley, making these just a little bit different, but it will probably be noticeable. Also worth noting that the mash bill on this is also exactly the same as the kind of, I guess, entry-level Buffalo Trace, which I compared it to a few weeks ago, which is just interesting. It's basically just the barrel work and the aging that makes this a distinctly different bourbon. The other thing that will set it kind of quite far away from the Wild Turkey is that it's 45% or 90 proof, meaning there's a 5% deficit here, which means we should probably start with the Eagle Rare. Eagle-eyed viewers of the channel will probably notice that the amount in these bottles has dropped a little bit since I kind of first talked about them, and well, that's because, well, they're just moreish. They're just, yes, they are relatively affordable, easy to come by, and delicious, which means, well, I have no guilt about drinking them, and well, apparently I have. So let's get into it. Move you over there for a moment. First up, Eagle Rare. Obviously not a full bottle here, but you know, it's a lovely design, nice tall bottle this, just kind of printed on front there. It just looks the business, doesn't it? Let's get one poured. How does it sound? A bit disappointing, but never mind. Let's just pour a small sample into there. Bringing the Wild Turkey back in then. This is a much more, it feels more old school in terms of the bottle. It's kind of got the curves and the kind of the hip at the top. It's got an embossed turkey on it, just there. It's pretty nice. It just feels, I don't know, a bit more Wild West, which maybe that's something you want in your bourbon, who knows. How's it sound? That was better. That was better. Top's back on, bottles to the side, and so, I mean, they're in the respective hands, but this one is the Wild Turkey and this one is the Eagle Rare. Visually, the Eagle Rare is just slightly deeper. I don't know if that's even going to come across on camera, but the Eagle Rare, this one, is just, it's got a hint more orange to it, but otherwise they're kind of pretty normal caramelly looking bourbons. So yeah, you get the idea. Aroma wise then, it just smells good, honestly. I mean, candied, sweet. There is a bit of spice lingering in the background though. It's a bit peppery. I don't really remember that from this before. Maybe it's just changed as it's been exposed to the air in the bottle a bit, but that sounded funny. Hello? Is there an echo in here? It's got a richness, a depth, a darkness to it, almost kind of like licorice, wine tannins, that sort of thing. And it's got that sweet caramel, vanilla fudginess that you want from your bourbon, but it has got this extra kind of depthy dark note that is somewhere between licorice and dark fruits and just... yeah, it's a nice composition in terms of an aroma. It's appealing because it's not too sweet, but it's not sweet, and it's just, yeah, nicely contrasting, I think, is the way to describe it. The Wild Turkey 101, obviously 5% stronger, doesn't necessarily feel stronger on the nose, it has to be said. It's got more of a, oh no, there's a bit. When the esters get you, they get you. This feels a little bit more softened in some ways. It's a little bit closed down. The sweetness is in there, but there is a distinct note of that kind of barrel char, and it's almost forming, and I've definitely said it about other whiskies. I can't remember if I said it about Wild Turkey 101 or not, so I'll have to go back to a previous video to find out, but a peanutty thing? Like, think dry roasted nuts, that kind of experience, which is a flavour I'm a big fan of, I have to say, and maybe even a little bit of dark cherry. So that's you get the idea. They are actually quite distinctly different, which makes this more interesting from a comparison point of view. Sometimes you taste two and go, wow, they're kind of the same, but one's a little bit one way and one's a little bit the other. Aroma wise, at least, vastly different. Which one do I prefer just on aroma? Well, I'm hard pressed, if I'm honest. I'm a bit torn. On the one hand, I think the flavour or the aroma profile of the Wild Turkey 101 is leading more towards, I don't know, I guess flavours that I personally really enjoy. However, it's a bit closed off. It's maybe a bit simple, whereas the breadth, the contrast, the variety in the Eagle Rare is probably a little bit more appealing to me. So if we're talking pure just my preferences, then we're coming this way. If we're talking from a what do I enjoy from a more complex whiskey, then we're definitely going over here. So very much down the middle on that one. Taste time. So Eagle Rare. Cheers. It's just so, I don't want to say it's just so smooth, because I think that's doing it a disservice. It is smooth, but it still carries heaps and heaps of flavour. It's caramel sweet, but it's got a tanginess. That, interestingly, I thought I was going to be sat here saying this is kind of smooth and creamy and malty, given that the rye content in the Wild Turkey is just that little bit higher. And actually, I'm getting quite a lot of spice notes from this. It's distinctly peppery, and there is actually a tiny bit of that kind of TCP medicinal note that I have picked out in a lot of other whiskies, and I think when I've compared this to some others, I've not necessarily noticed it because it's not that strong. But sat here, completely untainted palate, not drank anything else or eaten anything for hours, there is just a little bit of that very almost kind of clinical cleaning kind of agent thing. That's not a bad thing. It always descriptively sounds poor. It's something that's very common in a lot of Scotch whiskies, and I think it's something that comes from either toasted malt or, more likely in this case, severe barrel toasting. And the end on this though, slightly toasted kind of almost adult creme caramel is where I take it. It has just got that nice soft vanilla creamy custardy thing with a few nice kind of sharp toasty edges that just really complete the package. Quick water break. Right then, palate cleansed and time for Wild Turkey 101. So as I said, this has got that kind of almost kind of semi-savoury kind of dry roasted nut flavour to it. Oops, apologies. Cheers. And that absolutely translates on the palate. It's interesting because I think if you were to kind of, you know, set me back just one evening and go, right, you're picking one whiskey tonight, what is it? And these are your choices. I think in my head I'd be going immediately this way. Almost without even thinking about it. It's slightly more complex. It's just a more considered, more, you know, it's aged more longer. It's just there. However, despite the increased ABV on the 101, I actually think it's a slightly smoother drink. Now, that's not necessarily just indicative of strength. It also means that maybe potentially, you know, the maturation in the barrels and everything else just isn't invoking enough flavour for it to be really spiky, I guess. But at the same time, you would expect something that's been aged for longer to have mellowed out quite a bit more in terms of that kind of boozy intensity. Not other flavours so much, but certainly that component. And well, this hasn't. This is very smooth, and that peanut element is absolutely at the forefront for me right now. Whiskey changes as it ages, as air gets to it, everything else. I can't remember if I said this before about it, but that's like high proof adult Reese's Pieces Buttercups. Like, this is just, it is simpler, it is less considered somehow, but at the same time, that is just a wildly brilliant bourbon for what can be 25 quid. That is still astounding in my mind. I'm really looking forward to opening up the Wild Turkey Rare Breed. I've not tried it yet. I've got one on the shelf behind me, and I'm probably going to pitch that up against this next. If you want to see that video, let me know in the comments below, or anything else on the shelf. I mean, got all sorts on there, more stuff arriving all the time, because I wouldn't say I have a whiskey drinking problem, but I definitely have a whiskey buying problem. So yeah. Anyway, I am torn. I'm going to have to come back over here. Look, I've pitched these two against each other because I know they're both absolutely bloody fantastic, if I'm honest. They are incredible. Therefore, trying to make a decision on them, I was always going to end up going, look, these are both pretty damn good. We knew that from the outset. If I wanted to sit outside, overlooking some countryside, have a considered drink, you know, deep in thought, mulling something over, trying to problem solve, and also wanting to really pick apart some nuances, some intricacies to a whiskey. Well, actually, if you're outside in the UK, Scotch is better for that. But that aside, if you don't like Scotch at all, Eagle Rare is going to be the one. It's a little bit more it is more complex. It's got more going on. However, if you want an easy sipper, something that's not going to require too much attention, but still has all those hallmarks of quality and at an incredibly low price, Wild Turkey 101. So I am going to have to kind of not state a winner. Which one of these I would go for is going to depend on my mood entirely. And the best thing you could probably do right now is buy one of each, is my opinion, because they are wildly different enough, wildly turkey different enough, bad pun, to be, you know, quite a Eagle Rare treat. So enough whiskey puns now, that's bad enough. But you know what I mean. One of each will give you a breadth of options, and they are just not anywhere near close enough for it to feel like a wasted purchase. Distinctly different offerings, both absolutely worth it. Double thumbs up over here and over here, because yeah, it's all very, very good. And I think that's all I've got to say about it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already subscribed, if you'll be so kind, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.